Alright, another outdoorsy one. This time, it's the most beautiful weather the world's ever seen. Got a few. Some of them I'm not too ashamed of, so that's always good. But I'm doing this while I'm walking the dogs, so I'm going to have to stop at points to pick up dog shit, which is it's everybody's favourite pastime, isn't it? Okay, I'm just going to try and read them off as best I can. I know some of them are just kind of short notes rather than long things. It may be true that, on average, men prefer working with things and women prefer working with people. But this dichotomy collapses for men who fail to see the distinction, or women as well, I guess. What would stop someone from working with people if they only saw them as things anyway? Wow, that's a interesting little tidbit. Tidbit? Tidbit. It's probably not tidbit, is it? Anyway. God, there are a few of these to get through. I was thinking about Robin Williams' suicide again. I'm not sure how well it fits the old Maslow's hierarchy of needs, nor would most of my suggested remedies seem to have aided him. So what could have been done? Was it only medication that could save him? Better relationships? Or was death really always going to be the best option for him? And I'm thinking, if you're going to talk about this kind of thing, you should probably know more about them. But I think he had some kind of disjointed relationship with the daughter or something like that, so maybe he didn't have proper relationships, good enough relationships. And also I seem to remember, I think he used to do quite a bit of his standard routine about, okay, well yeah, let's just do that, let's just have really loud noises. Quite a bit about how he used to be addicted to cocaine, so drug addiction was obviously something. Okay, I think one of the reasons Fortnite is so popular, or rather so captivating, is because it is fairly unique as a video game. To me. There are people, so... Come on, Twix. Oh, this is annoying. I'm having to interrupt my own speeches. Or rather so captivating is because it is fairly unique as a video game in one regard more than others, especially for a shooter game. Its uniqueness is that it rewards almost with equal, if not even with greater weight, the art of defence in combat. Oh, the art of defence, you twat. It's a video game for kids. Which almost every other game fails to provide the opportunity for. The most timeless games seem to use... Oh, has she done a shit? No. The most timeless games seem to utilise a similar mechanic, chess being one example. And of course, Fortnite is... Oh, for fuck's sake. Jesus Christ. Do you mind? Oh, there are going to be dog walkers coming in this way soon as well. I mean, no one's worse than a dog walker. The most timeless games seem to utilise similar mechanics, chess being one example. And of course, Fortnite is far more appealing and less boring than chess. Less boring to... obviously... never mind. Less boring than chess because it uses modern technology and is far more diverse and complex than a simple board game, even though I've written them, which I know to be wrong. Than a simple board game. Not that chess is by any means simple. Most video games, shooters... Twiggy! Trying to walk into the bloody road. And get herself killed. Oh, who am I to stop her? Only defense... most video games, shooters in particular, only offer defense as a tactical... Oh, hang on. Oh, only defense as a tactical option and isn't... Okay. Hang on, I've got to pause here. Oh, there we go. Just engaged in a long conversation with a dog walker, which I always find very awkward and irritating. Anywho, most video game shooters in particular only offer defense as a tactical option in as much as you become so good at attacking, your opponents struggle to attack you back. The classic, the best defense is a good offense, which is a pretty vapid statement, which is, of course, an example of the classic, the best defense is a good offense, which is a pretty vapid statement, as its reverse works just as well. I mean, the best offense is a good defense. Anyway, you might argue that hiding behind things is a defense of sorts, but there is a very low skill cap on this, and little room for improvement beyond a certain point. Jesus Christ, that's what a skill cap means, Ollie. God, why do people have to be around all the time, eh? I wonder whether there's anything truly unique about non-suicidal people, other than that they just don't think about it. Perhaps there is no such thing, not that they haven't thought about it, but they just don't think about it often. Perhaps there is no such thing as mental well-being other than the absence of unwell thoughts. And so the question arises, how can you stop thinking about suicide or negative thoughts in general? Maybe the cure to depression is to be so occupied with thoughts that aren't negative that there's no time in which you would be able to think negatively. So what should one think about? Assuming all of this isn't bullshit, the alternative is something else I've posited before, and that is that it's a matter of perspective rather than the thoughts themselves. Anyway, that's probably not the only alternative, but that's the only one I'm caring to talk about right now. Watching Avengers Infinity War, I found myself, which is very good, actually, I was very impressed with it. I'm rather happy with that. That, Thor Ragnarok, which are the two Marvel good ones, and Wonder Woman have been the best superhero movies I think I've seen in a long while. Watching Avengers Infinity War, I found myself imagining that same question. Who's to say what Thanos is doing? What Thanos is doing is wrong if it's in his best self-interest. If it's in his best self-interest. And again, the answer seems so obvious to me. That's the end of the sentence. Obviously, the heroes, and you, should realise that what he has in mind certainly isn't in your self-interest, and is in fact entirely opposed to your self-interest. So it is up to you to do everything in your power, including convincing others that it is in their self-interest to side with you to counter his plans. So I was talking about this with Nash again, and at the top of every individual's pyramid should be their self-interest. So below that would be other people's self-interest, because that's very likely going to impact heavily on your own self-interest. But always at the top. So Thanos is one, his self-interest would be at the top. What he's failing to realise is that he's probably wrong about what is actually in his self-interest. And another thing about Infinity War was I actually liked Thanos because he wasn't just the stereotypical he's evil and you just have to accept that he's evil, but there's no reason behind what he's doing. There was actually reason to what he's doing, and it's not immediately obvious. I write that anyway, so also, what Thanos has in mind isn't immediately obvious as evil. The example of what happened on his home planet, Titan, suggests that maybe his home population would have been better off if they had allowed his plan to come to fruition. Now, this doesn't mean if it would have worked. In that scenario, it would by definition work in all by extrapolation. And also, the assumption is made that the net area under the curve would have been greater if Thanos' plan had been enacted, rather than the zero it is brought to by extinction. It is hypothetically possible that the extinction of half the population would have been so traumatic that the remaining half would have experienced a negative area under the curve. Another thing is, twins, come on. If you've got an entire population that's suffering, and the suffering is population for the resources, whatever, then it might be easy for some portion of the population to sacrifice themselves for the good of the remainder, because otherwise everyone's area under the curve is negative. Right. One of the ways I would argue to keep your mind sufficiently occupied so that you can't think suicidal or depressed thoughts is to have someone, a partner or a child perhaps, that you love enough that they keep you engaged enough, or a hobby or job, etc., that you enjoy. That's keeps your mind occupied. Ethical, but obviously it's quite hard to think of what those things can be defined. Anyway, it's interesting. There's a lorry van going past with a load of green and orange cones on the back of it, and it looks like a kind of green and orange hedgehog, a bit like the dinosaur character guy in Fallout. You're going this way, come on. I need longer to talk about my very important things. I need to reveal the truth to the world. Ethical egoism promotes the idea... Oh, hang on. Ethical egoism promotes the idea of adopting the best ethical shorthands you can, which have evolved alongside us over time. For a while, non-written or even properly conceptualized codes of ethics would have governed our behaviour and what we deemed appropriate and or admirable. I need to sneeze again. But over time, these ethical codes evolved. Religions provided perhaps some of the first of these, Ten Commandments, etc. First of the actual, kind of written ones. Similarly, the attributes that described goodness were encapsulated in archetypal characters such as Jesus, Muhammad, and the Buddha. And those who tried to behave as much like the archetypes likely experienced improved evolutionary fitness. But also, art, if all forms, in all forms, but especially storytelling, added nuance to, expanded, clarified, and amended these archetypal characters into heroes like Hercules, David Copperfield, and Harry Potter. It's kind of going forward through time there a bit. So too our understanding of good and evil evolved, or rather, the patterns we recognise as indicative of good and evil. Again, good and evil are just words that we're ascribing to certain things. There's no inherently... anyway. Probability trees that we use to inform... So I had this idea. What we're trying to do is we're trying to develop... some kind of animal died here. Develop codes of... kind of shorthands, kind of little rules to follow that maximise. So in each instance you can go multiple ways, but let's just say two. So there's like probability trees, right? And the probability of your life, you're trying to always go in the direction that's best for you, right? And the probability of what's best for you being to murder a load of people is probably quite low, right? So if you imagine a probability tree, in this instant you can either go around murdering everyone or not. The 0 to 1 probability of that being best for you or not would be very low. Okay, there we go, terrible. Probability trees that we use to inform our behaviour. These evolve and make use of our accumulated knowledge and pattern recognition. We're not smart enough to solve the game theory problem ourselves in each moment. So it's the most complex game theory problem there is, and it changes from moment to moment. So we use condensed rules to aid us. We develop these rules by utilising our abilities to interact with past and future, memory and imagination, versions of ourselves and past versions of other people, the true power of the spoken and written word. These then inform, alongside the revolutions of reason and science, our statistical appraisals of certain behaviours and actions that we use to decide how to behave in order to most likely act in our self-interests. And not all moral systems or religions, especially religions or archetypes, are equal. Some are more complete and just downright better than others, for the very goals they set out to achieve. So they're better at achieving their own goals. As role models for behaviour, they can do better or worse jobs for how they will benefit both the follower and those in contact with the follower of these role models. I'd say, although I know very little about either, and also have grown up in a part of the world where one is far more prominent and revered, and so am likely influenced by this prejudice. But I would say on the surface, Jesus appears to be a better role model than Muhammad. I'm basing this for the most part on their proposed treatment and perception of women. So there's only one metric, but I think Jesus does better. I don't know, maybe he doesn't. I haven't read the Bible yet, or the Quran. I intend to do both, but I have a lot of stuff I intend to read, so... Oh, finally someone gets self-interest properly. And who would it turn out? Who would have thought it turn out to be Jordan Peterson? So he did, I think it was probably in his Q&A thing, but I just saw the snippet of it. He basically tackled egoism. I think it was basically tackling psychological egoism. Another idea about that. Not really, it was the same idea, but in that study they did with the empathetic people, and them still being empathetic even though they didn't think they were being watched. Well, you need to believe that you're an empathetic person to really reap the rewards. Anyway, I talked about that a bit before, but I can't be bothered to do that right. Jordan Peterson talked about egoism, and he kind of gets it, really. I think he was referencing Piaget, so maybe I'm basically smarter than Piaget, or as smart as Piaget, really. And he seems to think he was pretty smart. But yeah, what's really in your self-interest would obviously take into account the self-interest of everyone else, because and it's obviously not acting in your immediate self-interest, because you're more than, well, you're the you right now will be the you right now in a minute, and the you right now in a minute will also need to be acting in self-interest. I think on people's deathbeds they should be given the option to take crystal meth or heroin. The reason being, you've got a very limited amount of time, and you're trying to maximise the area under the curve, and that would be one of the best ways to do it, I think. You're not likely to, well, unless we, like what's his name, Aubrey Gray, who did that, who solved some kind of maths problem, maths graphical theory problem. It was pretty interesting that he did that. Anyway, and we are able to live for hundreds of years Well, there might still be an end of life, or might not. Anyway, God, Jesus, I'm such an idiot. You're trying to maximise the area under the curve, and if there's an end to the area, if there's an end, an imminent end to that area, you might as well try to peak it without, and you won't get any of the downsides of that drastic peak. Also, yeah, I think it would make people have a bit more of a realistic view of death, and actually make it something that you're kind of looking forward to a little bit, kind of, in a way. Even though I kind of look forward to it anyway. Both Sam and Jordan have made strong cases against lying and for the importance of truth, although they don't quite agree on what the latter is. I think I may have my own idea, although it's not too far from Jordan's, for the importance of it. If we accept that we are trying to come up with ways of ensuring we act in our self-interest, our actual self-interest across time, area under the curve of eudaimonia, and we use media like art and stories to encapsulate characters that represent the characteristics which are more likely, open brackets heroes, close brackets, and less likely, open brackets villains, close brackets, to help us achieve the same, then it is important that these characters accurately portray the dynamics of the world. Now, the dynamics of the world change drastically over time as we and cultures evolve, and we also have some degree of instinct, which means that stories must at least be passable. But there is no reason to assume that a story cannot be passable and yet counter the objective of improving our lives. Take David Copperfield, for example. He falls in love with a girl, and the reader is eventually acutely aware that she is not quite the right woman for him. But he remains loyal to her for her entire lifetime, until she dies, obviously. But she does die, relatively prematurely, and of course he eventually falls in love, although he had always really been in love with her anyway, with another woman. And they are truly happy together. So the mini, and less obvious, implied moral of the story is that remaining loyal, even when you know this means staying with someone not to be the right person for you, will eventually pay off. It is possible to imagine, although he didn't quite know it, but anyway. It is possible to imagine a writer setting out to make this point, whilst not actually believing it to be true. Not the case, but anyway. I believe this could be an incredibly detrimental act. Now, I don't believe this to be the case with David Copperfield. I believe loyalty is almost always going to work out better for you and your partner than any surface-level adverse desires. Not that this was implied in David Copperfield. And it's worth mentioning how this ties into religion. Religion has often used the promise of the eternal afterlife as the supposed reward to expect for one's actions. And seeing as we have seemingly no reason to believe this to be true, come on, Trix. God's sake, it's a winner. And seeing as we have seemingly no reason to believe this to be true, I think it is in many ways the exact kind of lie I was talking about, where authors advise actions and don't provide their true interpretation of how those actions will manifest themselves in the world, and so they don't provide a proper reason. Anyway. Or perhaps they didn't knowingly lie, but lied by being wrong. So yes, an author should be trying to advise the reader in how best to behave for them and everyone around them. Anyway, and accurately represent how their imagination, using their imagination, how their actions will actually pan out if they were used in real life. Imagining really hard what it would be like to be a different person reveals an awful lot about what you think of other people. Just imagining yourself being a person or even when you just close your eyes basically and do this. Just being a person of a different skin colour, sex, age, mindset, sexuality, hair colour, era, everything, and anything, or even a specific person that you may know well or not so well. Yeah, it's really interesting. I was doing it. Kind of reveals a few things that you might think, and then kind of I don't know. Kind of if you, I think it would be good for racist people and sexist people and all these things to just do it, because you kind of realise you could be anyone. Your mind is relatively independent of your body. But yeah, it's an interesting little thought experiment. Not really a thought experiment, but a little thing you can do. Thought exercise. Okay, done.